3 terrifying true New Year's Eve horror stories that will haunt you forever. I never should have opened that door. The air was thick with dread, a chilling whisper of some unseen evil. I glanced at the clock. Midnight was close, yet my heart raced in a different rhythm, one of fear. I had just finished decorating my apartment. Colorful streamers hung limply from the ceiling. The smell of popcorn lingered, a mix of buttery delight wrapped in anticipation. My friends would arrive soon. I was excited. I was ready. But as I stood there, an unsettling shiver crawled down my spine. Shadows danced along the walls, teasing me with shapes that seemed too defined. I could almost hear them whispering my name. The temperature dropped suddenly, as if someone threw open a window, even though I was alone. I glanced around. All was still, but my heart wouldn't calm down. Then came the noises. A soft scratching from behind the door. I froze, straining to hear over the pounding of my heart. It felt like the walls were closing in, the very air tightening around me. My hands shook as I reached for the doorknob, that cursed handle that beckoned me. The whispers grew louder and more frantic. My breath hitched. I could almost make out words, phrases fluttering just out of reach. I turned toward the door, every nerve in my body screaming to flee. But I was rooted to the spot, consumed by a morbid curiosity. A crash echoed. Glass shattered in what felt like slow motion. Fear surged through me, icy and hot all at once. I staggered backward, my mind racing with possibilities. Was there someone in my apartment? Or was it something far worse? I glanced back at the door. Would it reveal a friend or a nightmare? The anticipation sliced through me like a knife. Another crash, louder this time. My pulse raced. I could hardly breathe, it felt like the very air around me was charged with dark energy. The shadows near the door grew thicker, swirling as if something dark was lurking just beyond my vision. I looked again, and that's when I saw it. A figure, cloaked in an unnatural darkness, standing just out of reach. Its eyes glowed faintly, hungry and cold. I gasped, every muscle tensing, my mind screaming at me to run. But I remained frozen, trapped in horror, as the figure slowly raised a hand, beckoning me closer. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure's hand hovered, its fingers curling in a sinuous motion as if inviting me into an abyss of darkness. I could hardly think, the fog of terror writhing in my chest, making every breath a struggle. The whispers intensified, now a cacophony of voices that enveloped me like a suffocating blanket. Come closer. It was a command, not a suggestion. I could feel it weaving its way into my mind, seducing my thoughts with promises of revelation, of eternal knowledge. Yet beneath those tantalizing whispers lay an undercurrent of dread, one I was too aware of to ignore. Instinctively, I took a step back, but the darkness slithered forward, a predator emboldened by my fear. I turned to escape, adrenaline surging through me like a wild beast, but before I could reach the living room, the lights flickered violently, casting a series of jarring shadows across the walls. A laughter low, gravelly, and devoid of joy echoed through my apartment. It rippled up my spine, compelling and sinister, as if the very room shared a secret only it could comprehend. My heart hammered against my ribs, a gut-wrenching call to action against the looming horror. With trembling hands, I grasped the lamp on the nearest table, brandishing it like a weapon. My composure shattered, and I felt like a child again, confronted with the monster under the bed. The darkness behind the door grew thicker, more sentient, as if it could sense my fear and was drunk on my panic that I didn't want to see it again, but my gaze was drawn back to the ominous figure. It had stepped closer, though I couldn't remember it moving. Those eyes, such an unnatural light, deep and hungry, sought me out. They pierced through me, unraveling my resolve, confusing me with their mesmerizing allure. Suddenly, a violent rattle struck the door, causing it to shudder on its hinges. The weight of whatever was behind it seemed to press against the wood, a force threatening to burst through. I spun around, planning my escape, but the room was a labyrinth of shadows, each corner alive with unseen forces. "I can help you," the figure hissed, its voice now slithering through the air like smoke. "You're not alone. You've always been lost. Let me guide you." I shook my head, refusing the offer that dripped like poison. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but those ethereal eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my body begin to betray me. Each heartbeat echoed a dull thud against my ears, rhythmically synchronizing with the shadows stretching nearer. "My friends will be here soon," I exclaimed, desperation creeping into my voice as I glanced at the clock. Only moments remained until midnight. Couldn't I hold on until then? But even as I thought it, I could sense the futility of my hope. The air grew heavy with despair, fragments of laughter crackled in the darkness like shards of glass. Just as I turned to make a break for the window, the sound of shattering glass erupted again, this time, followed by a deafening silence. All the walls seemed to close in around me, the shadows shifting chaotically as I took a hesitant step back. The entity was closer now, its cold breath brushing against my skin, sending a wave of ice through my veins. And then it happened. The lights flickered one last time before plunging the room into darkness. In the void, I felt the presence surge forward, slithering around me, tangling with my limbs. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized I was not in control. The figure's whisper morphed into a desperate wail, calling out for something that made the world tremble beneath me. "It's time to choose," the entity screeched, a guttural instinct overcoming its alluring tenor. Behind me, the door splintered, and the world beyond it cracked open. Beyond the threshold lay a void I had never known, swirling with colorless terror. As the darkness began to envelop me, I understood with blinding clarity what my choice would mean, but it was too late. A shattering glimpse of my friends, a frail hope for salvation, cut through the haze as they burst into the apartment. Their faces, adorned with smiles, twisted into horror the moment they stepped inside. But the laughter continued, resonating from within the shadow, a mockery of everything I had ever held dear. Then, silence fell. No whispers, no laughter, just a heavy void that clutched at my heart. All eyes turned to the entity, now standing tall between me and my friends, and I felt as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the answer hidden in the darkness. And in the silence, the door swung shut behind them. My heart exploded with dread. The tension thickened the air like a fog, wrapping around us as my friends stood frozen, their earlier expressions of joy now replaced with wide-eyed terror. I could feel the entity's power rising, an unseen tempest swirling with dark intent, and I fought the urge to scream. Trapped between the person I once was and the horror that loomed before me, I felt myself fracturing. "What is that?" Sarah, my closest friend, managed to whisper, her gaze flickering between me and the figure that now etched itself into the fabric of my reality. The shadows twisted and twirled with a life of their own, reflecting the dread thrumming in the room. "I don't know," I choked out, though part of me knew. "But we need to leave. Now." I turned to the window, now a canvas of despair. Outside, the world had shifted to an ethereal void, shadows waltzing in the moonlight, far removed from the jovial New Year's celebrations just moments before. The echo of fireworks had faded to a haunting silence, leaving only the palpable stillness of the night. In an instinctive act of survival, I lunged forward, grabbing the nearest friend David by the arm, my eyes pleading with him to comprehend the danger. But the entity shifted, its form contorting into a grotesque mimicry of a laughter, echoing through the silence with a chilling familiarity, enveloping us in a cloak of utter horror. "Stay," it commanded, the word slicing through the air like a knife. My body trembled against the weight of its will, and David, his expression contorted between confusion and fear, stayed rooted in place. "No." I hissed, fear clawing at my throat. "Don't listen," but the air surged with a pulse of energy, disrupting the very fabric of our existence. The figure surged forward, hands reaching out toward my friends with a ravenous hunger. As they stood transfixed, I saw a moment of recognition in their eyes, an acknowledgement of a fate they could scarcely fathom. "Come join us," it hissed, seductive in its promisea sweetness laced with decay. The shadows snaked across the floor, inviting my friends to the maw of the enigma that had ensnared me. The whispers erupted, a sudden, chaotic chorus of my name intertwined with mockery and pleasure, clouding the air with a tangible dread. "What does it want?" Sarah cried out, her voice trembling, barely above a whisper, but even in her fear, the entity seemed to draw strength. It reveled in our uncertainty, and the laughter crescendoed like a funeral dirge, a celebration of our impending doom. Everything felt surreal, like a nightmare twisting in on itself. With resolve, I stepped in front of my friends, acting as a barrier against the beckoning shadows. "You'll have to go through me," I said fiercely, even as doubt gnawed at my insides. I couldn't let it take them, and then the door shimmered, revealing a glint of silver light that sliced through the darkness, illuminating the figure for a brief moment. In that flash, I saw its true form warped and grotesque, a mass of amalgamated fears and regrets, a living embodiment of everything I had buried deep within myself. I knew then that this was no mere entity, it was a reflection of my darkest anxieties, the secrets that gnawed at my soul, taking shape and manifesting with terrifying clarity. My mind spiraled. How could I combat something so intimately tethered to my essence? "Make your choice," it howled, twisting reality further as the shadows writhed, forging an intricate web that snared my friends, yanking them inch by inch toward its insatiable grasp. Each moment felt like an eternity, time dilating into a twisted mockery of reality. The panicked cries of David and Sarah cut through my haze, but I couldn't break away, my limbs heavy as if weighted down by chains forged of despair. Just as I felt the last vestiges of courage slipping, a realization seized me, something buried deep inside. "You're nothing. You have no power over me." I screamed into the void, the words bursting forth from a primal well of defiance. It was then that I noticed the floor beneath us. Cracks began to weave through the hardwood, radiating from where the shadows coiled menacingly. In their desperation, my friends surged forward at my side, rallying against the malevolent urge of the entity. "Together!" Sarah shouted, igniting a spark of hope in my heart. "We could defy the darkness." But the shadows surged back, a tempest unleashed as the entity shrieked, its laughter ripping apart the fragments of resolve we had clung to. As the ground cracked wider, I could feel the floor trembling beneath the weight of our fears, a throbbing heartbeat echoing the fragility of our stand. The shattering of reality continued, and as my vision warped around us, I noticed new figures forming in the darkness, ghostly visages emerging, friends of mine I had lost along the way, beckoning with hollow eyes, urging me to succeed, yet ensnared by the entity's wretched grasp. With a final cry, the walls began to pulse, and it felt as if the very air was thickening into a suffocating weight. The entity recoiled, obscured by swelling waves of sinister energy, its visage shifting as it locked onto my friends, hunger radiating from it like heat from an open flame. "Leave now, or be consumed," I shouted, my voice echoing against the cacophony, a final desperate bid to salvage whatever shred of hope remained. The instant those words left my lips, everything froze. The shadows halted mid-motion, and for a fleeting moment, silence enveloped us before plunging us into the void, and just as I thought we'd escaped, a sharp pain pierced through my skin, a tether that bound me to the entity. As my vision began to dim, a chilling realization washed over me. The choice I had made would haunt me, as the void pulsated and resonated with newfound power, eager to consume everything and everyone I had ever cared for. A blinding light erupted, and I screamed as I felt the world around me shatter like glass. Then nothingness. The last remnants of my conscious thoughts faded, and darkness swept me away, deeper and deeper into an abyss, a chilling laughter echoing in the distance, intertwining like a taunting lullaby as the shadows closed in. I wouldn't just be consumed. I would become the darkness itself. Awareness came slowly, a heavy fog lifting from my consciousness as shards of memory cut through the dense shroud of darkness. I stirred, gasping in disorientation, and struggled to make sense of my surroundings. Cold stone beneath me replaced the warmth of the hardwood floor, the air was frigid, stinging my lungs as I drew desperate breaths. The silence felt wrong, oppressive, as though the weight of unseen eyes bore down upon me. I forced myself to look around, panic crashing over me like icy waves. This place was different, a cavernous expanse, walls slick with moisture and shimmering with a dim glow, a sickly green that flickered like the memories I tried to grasp. David? Sarah? I called out, my voice barely a whisper, afraid that speaking too loudly would shatter the remnants of whatever tenuous safety enveloped me. No response. Just an unsettling stillness that served to heighten the pounding in my chest. As I stood, swaying slightly, I turned to the deeper recesses of the cavern. An echo of soft sobbing slithered through the air, drawing me like a moth to flame. Anxiety constricted my throat as I pressed forward, each step resonating ominously against the stone like a countdown to a hidden doom. Please. Is anyone there? I cried, my voice reflecting back to me from the dark embrace of the cavern. With every syllable, the sobbing became clearer, more distinct, a heartbreaking wail that gnawed at my core. It sounded like Sarah, summoning whatever courage remained. I followed the sound, tangling through narrow passageways that felt alive, walls pulsing gently under my fingertips, as if the stone itself was breathing. My heart raced as flickers of memory resurfaced, the New Year's celebration, the shadowy figure, the piercing laughter, and then darkness. Sarah! I shouted, urgency flooding my voice. Where are you? Finally, I reached a larger chamber, lit by an eerie phosphorescence that revealed grotesque images carved into the stone walls, twisted faces wailing in torment, abstract shapes morphed into nightmarish forms. It was as if the walls were living chronicles of fear and despair. In the center of the room lay a pool of reflective water, swirling like quicksilver, pulling at my mind with hypnotic allure. And there, on the edge of the pool, I saw her, Sarah. She knelt, hands submerged in the liquid, hair wild around her face, as if grasping at something just out of reach. Sarah! I rushed toward her, but an invisible force suddenly knocked me back, sending me sprawling against the wall. Pain shot through my body, and I could barely breathe, the shadows swirling around me. Don't, she muttered, her voice distant, almost robotic. You can't help me. Why? What's happening? I struggled to my feet as the sobs morphed into laughter, cruel and mocking, bouncing off the walls and twisting my insides. We need to get out of here. Please, stay away. Her voice sharpened, and she withdrew, glancing back at the pool with terror illuminating her features. It's not just a reflection. It shows you everything. What do you mean? I asked, frantically attempting to close the distance. Sarah, she shuddered violently, her eyes locked onto mine, wide with a blend of panic and something else, something dark. Don't look into the water. It will take you too. But I was already stepping closer, a surge of curiosity battling with my reservoir of fear. The whispers intensified, clawing their way into my brain, begging me to look, promising insight, connection, maybe even salvation. The surface smoothed, revealing a scene that felt achingly familiar and entirely alien, a vision of my friends gathered around a roaring fire, faces aglow with laughter, untouched by the horrors I now faced. But then the flames flickered, shadowy figures creeping around the edges of the light. Forcing laughter blended with screams that left an acrid taste in my mouth. Stop! I screamed, but my voice was lost to the sinister laughter echoing through the chamber. I told you not to look. Sarah wailed, tears streaming down her cheeks as she struggled to pull her hands away from the pool. It shows your greatest fears, your worst memories. You'll end up like them. It took a moment to realize whom she meant. David's face appeared in the rippling depths, distorted and yet achingly familiar. I fought against the pull, but a violent surge of energy shot through me, the pool beckoning, relentless in its hunger. Help me! My cry escaped into the cavern, and in that moment, I felt the shadows shift, tightening around me, vibrating with malignant glee. I can't hold it much longer. Sarah screamed, a quiet desperation clawing at her voice. I could see her hands trembling beneath the water's surface. The ingestion was growing, it sought to pull her in, to devour her soul. I moved, instinctively, as if drawn by an invisible tether, each step heavier than the last. No. I wouldn't go to her, I had to help her, had to reach her before it was too late, and then the shimmering surface erupted, sending cold flares of liquid surging toward me, striking with the force of a tidal wave. A voice cut through my mind like glass shattering, echoing the dark promises of eternity. joyous.no. I screamed, fighting against the pressure crushing me. The laughter swelled, and I saw fleeting silhouettes of those I had lost, faces twisted in agony and triumph, inviting me to surrender. Suddenly, the cavern began to shake, walls contracting as the very existence of this place trembled under my shattered resolve. The laughter intensified, filling my head with a cacophony that made it hard to think. "Sarah!" I yelled, feeling the pull become magnetic, an all-consuming force. And just before everything went black, an agonized scream erupted from the depths of the water, followed by an eerie silence as Sarah was tugged under. The final image burned into my mind, my friends' faces twisted in anguish, a chilling reminder of bonds now broken and lives shattered. The pool pulsed with energy, and the shadows grew more potent, whispering my name with promises of absolution and perverse comfort. When I awoke once more, I was alone, the cavern eerily quiet save for a low, sinister chuckle emanating from behind me. As I turned to face the darkness, my heart descending into a pit of dread. "Welcome back," it hissed, and I was enveloped by the cold fingers of despair, plunged into the haunting abyss where my deepest nightmares awaited. The laughter echoed once more, and I knew then the fight hadn't ended, it had only just begun. I stood in the oppressive darkness, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered resolve, as the chilling voice continued to resonate in the shadows. The cavern seemed to pulse around me, alive with sinister energy, as if it could sense my despair. My heart raced, the echo of Sarah's final scream drowned out by the ominous laughter that coiled through the air like smoke from a dying fire. "Who's there?" I croaked, the vulnerability in my voice betraying the fear coursing through me. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a deeper silence that thrummed with anticipation, a taut string ready to snap. As I peered into the dark, I could feel the air shift, a cold draft slithering through the chamber, wrapping around my legs and pulling at the hem of my shirt. There was something just out of sight, lurking in the folds of shadows, watching. I took a trembling step forward, the cold stone floor pressing against my bare feet like icy fingers caressing my skin. Then, without warning, a flicker of that sickly green light pulsed from the walls, illuminating grotesque figures that writhed in silent agony. A swarm of emotions crashed into me: fear, sorrow, rage, each more overwhelming than the last, as my brain struggled to process what was unfolding. "Come play with us," the voice taunted, now melodic but laced with malice. It slithered through the air, wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. "You're not real," I whispered, though doubt gnawed at my mind like an insatiable beast. I forced myself to step away from the pool, the surface glimmering with echoes of what had transpired. How long could I remain here, alone with these memories, and what horrors awaited me if I did? As if in response, the cavern began to shift, the ground trembling beneath me. The walls pulsated like breathing lungs, and the laughter returned, louder now, a cruel chorus that danced along the edges of my sanity. Sweat pooled at my brow as I scanned the darkness for a way out. "Sarah!" I shouted again, clutching at the tumult within me. I had to find her, I had to believe. She had warned me, but now I stood here, strangled by fear and regret. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the deep darkness, a silhouette wrapped in shadows, its essence slipping between realms. A gasp caught in my throat as it stepped forward, the flickering light revealing a twisted vis-a-vis grotesque parody of one of my friends, someone I had loved. David's face stared back at me, distorted with agony, the edges of his mouth stretched into a grin far too wide, too unnaturally sinister. "Help me," he croaked, his voice hitching in desperation. But in that moment, I realized the laughter, the whispers, the echoes, they had been mine all along. I was tethered to my own dread, facing the embodiments of my traumas, manifestations pulsing with malevolence. No. "You're not real. Get away from me," I shouted, backing away as the shadows loomed larger, no longer content with mere mockery. "Join us." David's voice shifted into 1,000 echoes, each one layered upon the last, breathing life into the darkness. You can't escape this place. We are all that's left of you. My mind raced, searching for an escape, for anything to sever the grip of this nightmare. I turned back toward the pool, feeling its magnetic pull threaten to consume me, beckoning me with promises of sweet oblivion. The flickering images within surged with bright intensity, showing not just my friends' faces, but the betrayal that lingered underneath, an ache that twisted into an unbearable weight. Sarah? I called out again, the despair in my voice igniting a desperate hope. I couldn't leave without her. In response, the cavern trembled, and I felt the shadows shift like a restless tide, eager to swallow me whole. A faint wail echoed from somewhere deeper within, a sound so achingly familiar. My heart seized, a flicker of light igniting within the suffocating darkness. Help! Sarah's voice was raw, fighting against the very currents of despair that enveloped the space. I'm here. Please. You have to find me, stay strong. I'm coming. I shouted. Instinctively reaching forward, forcing myself to move past the spectral forms behind me, past the ghastly laughter that clawed at my sanity. Each step was a battle against the pull of the water, the sinister remnants of my past creeping into my thoughts, whispering doubts and fears that sought to thread themselves through my resolve. As I navigated the shifting shadows, the echoes morphed into a cacophony of all the things I had lost, all the fears that had nearly broken me. The air crackled with tension, and for a moment, I could see through the veil of despair a glimpse of Sarah, her silhouette barely visible, struggling against a tide of darkness. I rushed forward, adrenaline surging, desperation igniting my limbs. But just as I reached the edge of the darkness, the laughter exploded into a deafening roar, the shadows writhing around me as they pulled at my mind, dragging me backward. Then came a deafening silence. A palpable stillness hung in the air like the calm before a storm. What if she's gone? David's distorted voice echoed, now a thunderous proclamation that rattled the very bones of the cavern. What if you're all alone? A flicker of fear sliced through me as the ground trembled again, far more violently, and the shadows surged forth, beckoning me back toward the pool, threatening to drag me into the depths where my darkest self resided. Sarah! I bellowed, desperation clawing at my throat, but the shadows intensified, their grip tightening with each heartbeat. I could feel the weight of their malice closing in, and then, as if in response to my plea, a scream pierced the air, a sound so filled with terror it made my skin crawl. A scream devoid of hope, stripped of all light. Help me, Sarah's voice whispered, trailing off into a horrific silence. My heart, already laden with dread, plummeted into an abyss of despair. The shadows swirled into a vortex of nightmares, and I knew, with pain wrapping around my soul, that I was about to find out just how far down the rabbit hole of my own making went. I braced myself against the encroaching void, knowing deep within that living nightmares awaited me, and the darkness had only just begun to reveal its true form. I stumbled forward, propelled by the last echo of Sarah's voice that hung in the air like a specter cloaked in desperation, curling around my thoughts. My heart raced, each beat a reminder of the sharp urgency clawing at my mind. The laughter had dulled, yet the remnants of those twisted cries lingered, simmering beneath the surface like a boiling cauldron waiting to spill over. Numbly, I continued deeper into the cavern, each step accompanied by the feeling that I was not alone. The walls shifted and sighed like a living entity, resonating with a dark appetite. Shadows curled and beckoned, and before long, I could feel the persistent pulse of dread wrapping around me tighter than ever before. Sarah! I screamed into the void, my voice slipping out into the blackness, swallowed by the cacophony of despair that answered with more silence. Recollections of laughter, the laughter of companions lost, echoed back to me, taunting me. From the corners of my vision, movement caught my attention. Shapes flickered in the dark, shifting with purpose. I had to focus. Squinting into the shadows, I spotted a small cluster of figures, their bodies grotesquely twisted and warped. An unsettling reminder of the friends they once were. They stood just beyond the reach of the sickly green light, mouths half open, frozen in twisted grins that felt like daggers to my heart. Help us, one murmured, the voice blending into the drone of the cave. I shook my head vigorously. You're not real. You can't be, but doubt clung to me, thick like the fog that cloaked each corner I turned. The air felt electric with their aching hopes, pulling me into an abyss of guilt. You left us, a voice echoed, a mournful note that gnawed at the fraying edges of my sanity. Sarah needs me. I cried, pushing through the gruesome memories that threatened to ensnare my thoughts. Stranger still, a chill swept over me, a rasping whisper seeping into my ears, a sweet coiling melody synonymous with temptation. It promised tranquility in surrender. I tried to block it out, to extinguish its influence with the fire of my determination. The flickering light wavered, and with it came the understanding that the shadows were shifting, sculpting themselves into horrors born from my very soul. A tableau of agony unfolded in front of me. Figures twisted in agony, their eyes hollow holes of despair, their once familiar faces stretched and contorted. Join us, they crooned, their voices harmonizing into a bitter lullaby, each note a hook that burrowed into my heart, threatening to yank me into the consuming void. You'll never be alone again. Stop. I shouted with all my might, rage bubbling up to counter the creeping despair. But the only answer came in the form of a sound, a sickening thud, a soft patter of wet footsteps echoing behind me. I turned, my pulse hammering in wild alarm. Out of the shadows emerged an amalgam of pieces, distorted limbs, a head barely resembling what had once been human. It moved with jerks and jolts, its visage an echo of all I had feared, a manifestation of my own regrets. Too late, it rasped, lips curling into an unsettling smile as I stumbled backward, the walls closing in. You can't hide from us, more followed behind, an unholy parade of my own choosing, the lost remnants of those who had once been my friends. Each face piled on the horror of my despair. They drifted forward, limbs intertwined in a grotesque dance, taunting me with every agonizing step. And then, in the distance, amidst the pulsating shadows, another sound wrapped around my consciousness, a low, rhythmic thumping that slowly crescendoed into a manic beat. It resonated deep within the cavern, vibrating against my chest, mingling with the lingering dread that pulsed from the figures around me. As the echoes grew louder, a figure broke free from the horde, stepping into the sickly green light. It was another spectral form, hazy but undeniably human. My breath stilled as recognition flooded in. Her features were marred by shadow, yet there was no mistaking Sarah's eyes, wide and frightened, boring into me. Run! She screamed, a plea laced with urgency. You have to get out. Before I could react, her figure dissipated back into the darkness, leaving only her words like a wisp of smoke haunting the air, urging me toward a way out I could not see. The thumping intensified, thrumming in time with my pounding heart. The sinister crowd began to close in, their mouths pooling with whispers, "You can't escape, you won't escape." Each syllable smothered my resolve, stripping away any lingering bravery I clutched. Suddenly, the ground heaved violently underfoot, the walls crumbling apart as the cavern began to collapse inward, sending shockwaves that split the shadows apart. But even amid the chaos, the figures accelerated toward me, a nightmare rush of shrieking, clamoring anguish. Get out! Sarah's voice echoed again, frantic, cutting through the dark. Panic surged through me, and I turned, running toward the faint glimmer of light that sparked in the distance, pulsating like a dying star. Yet, with every desperate step forward, the shadows twisted like serpents, coiling tighter around my legs, gripping me in their cold embrace. Then, just as I reached the threshold of the light, I felt a grip on my shoulder, icy as death, pulling me back into the abyss. Before I could scream, darkness surged forward, a tidal wave of horror crashing over me, all faded to black. And the knit was silent. Underneath that silence, a whisper curled into existence. You chose us, an echo of all my failures, of all I had tried to leave behind. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted before me, tearing through the darkness. In that moment of arresting illumination, a new figure emerged, claiming the forefront of my consciousness, a cloaked shape draped in memories, its true face hidden beneath shadows. Its voice was a low growl, draped in sinister familiarity, as it began to unveil the echoes of my past. What makes you think this is the end? It leered, a smirk etched into its tone. And it was then I understood, the real horror was not just in losing Sarah, but in facing the truth of my own creation, a swirling entanglement of my soul's deepest scars. Welcome back, it whispered, as the abyss opened wide once more, and I felt my sanity slip away like a soft sigh in the wind. The infernal darkness felt alive, throbbing around me like a heart that had been long forgotten. The suffocating silence was laced with unearthly howls, each one a solitary knife digging further into the corners of my soul. It soaked through my skin, numbing my senses as dread gripped me more tightly than the icy hands that clutched at my shoulder. In that blinding moment, the figure remained suspended in the radiant glow, a beacon of malevolence and familiarity entwined, shrouded by the remnants of my nightmares. I staggered back, my heart racing and my breath hitching in my throat. I tried to speak, to protest, but mere syllables choked and died upon my lips as its gaze bore into main tense, unfathomable. Do you remember how much you wanted to escape? To forget? It rasped, the voice trembling with an unsettling mirth. The walls around me trembled, resonating with the memory of decisions long made, decisions that had driven me to this waking nightmare. But you can never truly escape, can you? I was teetering on the precipice of awareness that shattered like glass when the cacophony of laughter rose again, entwined with soft weeping. It was a symphony of suffering, and within it was the unmistakable note of Sarah's cries, echoing and mingling with the taunts of the shadows swirling about me. Suddenly, the light flickered, the softness of my past crushed beneath the weight of the present terror. In an instant, the smoke-like figure loomed closer, revealing shadowy details: a torn gown stained with darkness, slick hair that fell like cascading rivers of night. Its almost familiar shape carved further into my reality, igniting the embers of fear within me. Join them, it beckoned, its finger forming a sinister curl that gestured at the swarming shadows. And those lost faces flickered around me, shimmering like the mirage of a long-forgotten dream, twisted, anguished, eyes pleading for release. They've been waiting for you. No. I gasped, heart pounding, an instinctual drive to flee burning through my veins. I can't, I won't, but the ground beneath me trembled again, fissuring as a black void opened wide at my feet, beckoning. The shadows poured in, a collective surge of sorrow and anger, pulling me toward the abyss where all my insecurities and regrets raged in fury. Just as I was about to be consumed, another memory flared to Lithian echo from another time: Sarah. I called into the fast-closing darkness, summoning her too familiar face, desperate to grasp onto something real. Something alive. But even as her name left my lips, the shadows clutched with renewed fervor, silencing my cries. I stumbled backward, trying to find footing, grappling for balance against the chaotic storm of swirling figures. Each face twisted in fury, mirroring back my hesitations, my failures, all the promises made and broken. You abandoned us. They screamed, a gut-wrenching crescendo hitting me like a physical blow. My body ached, exhaustion creeping in, threatening to drag me down. And then, within the swirling mass of sorrow and anger, an illuminated figure stood still, Sarah's silhouette framed in light, a stark contrast to the darkness threatening to engulf me. Help me! She cried, her voice piercing through the cacophony, each syllable like a siren's call echoing through the void. I'm here! I yelled, scrambling forward as the shadows clawed desperately at my edges. But the chasm of grief loomed ever larger, eager to swallow each bit of hope whole. I was drawn to her. She stretched a hand toward me, one eye fierce with determination and the other hollow, a glimpse into the void beyond. Run! She implored, urgency threading through her tone. But before I could take another step, a figure broke free from the Massa monstrosity born of the very essence of despair. Part human, part shadow, it lunged toward me, teeth glinting like daggers, hunger creeping into the edges of its gaze. With a primal scream bursting from my throat, I turned, desperate to escape the gnashing of teeth and clawing whispers. As I fled, the shadows howled, a cacophony of despair cascading around me, fingers reaching for my skin, dragging against the fabric of my essence. Then the ground surged once more, the walls of the cavern caving inward, as if the universe itself sought to claim me as its own. I barreled toward the light, that wretched, dwindling promise of salvation. But the shadows were relentless, laced with memory and pain, clawing at me until I stumbled and fell to my knees, and just when I thought all was lost, Sarah's voice erupted again amidst the clamor. "Remember why you came." In that moment of clarity, raw strength surged within me. I searched the darkness, the void swallowing everything around me, and screamed, "I will find you." The piercing howls crumbled into silence, a stifled gasp pressing against my chest. The space around me shifted, twisting and warping, shapes morphing into fleeting images, the remnants of a life still tethered to him, and as a cold sensation gripped me tighter, the shadows convulsed, lusting for my surrender, then everything stilled. In the stillness, I felt the suffocating presence of the figure before me, its face now emerging from the shadows as something more horrific than I ever anticipated, a mirror reflecting the worst parts of myself, coated in darkness. "Welcome back," indeed it whispered, revealing an abyssal void in its eyes, pulling me in as I felt the weight of my existence teetering on the edge of truth. And at that moment, with horror screaming through me, I discovered the chilling reality. It was never just my friends I had abandoned, it was a part of me I had sacrificed to escape these horrors, now rising once more to reclaim what was lost. A distant gnashing of teeth broke through the silence, echoing through the cavern. It was calling me, promising acceptance as the dimensional rift undulated and split open again. "What makes you think this is the end?" it taunted, as shadows began to swirl overhead and my heart pounded against my ribs. In the shivering darkness, I felt the grip of despair tighten, reminding me of the truth I had buried so deeply. Would I throw myself into that darkness to confront my demons, or would I succumb to the encroaching shadows that beckoned me? With that terrifying question echoing, the ground trembled, and the abyss lurched ready to consume everything. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown to some unspeakable climax, each second dragging over my senses like a heavy fog. It was in this petrified state of being that I noticed the churning void at my feet had begun to pulse an insatiable hunger, shifting in the reflection of my panic. I stood motionless, chest heaving, grasping at the moment like a lifeline slipping through my fingers. The figure before me split into two grotesque silhouettes, both mirrors of my fractured soul, each one embodying the memories I had tried so hard to bury. The one on the left was a twisted version of myself, a shattered visage marred with grief, shadows dancing around its form like spiteful flames. The other was an idealized version of who I wished to be, golden light wrapping around it, but that illumination was tainted with something equally sinister, a glint of madness and despair. "Choose," they chorused, voices ringing like death knells. My heart seized, recognizing both the promise and the threat instinctively woven within their challenge. The choice felt palpable, each path opening into the depths of some unfathomable horror. "Join us," the twisted echo of myself beckoned, extending a hand that dripped with shadow. "You know we belong together. All your brokenness, your regrets, it can live again. We can roam free, unshackled by this wretched facade of happiness you cling to. No. I didn't recognize the voice that rose to confront it, resonating like a clarion call opposing despair, the voice of Sarah, still shimmering at the edge of my perception. "You must not. They will devour you." In that moment, it felt as if time lurched, the cavern around me warping, shadows coiling tighter around my limbs. I could see Sarah's form wavering, flickering like a candle about to be snuffed out. My internal chaos mired me as if I were physically shackled to the walls that had risen from my deepest fears. Suddenly, the distorted mocking of my twin selves converged, their chorus rising to a fever pitch. "You think you can escape? You came here for solace, but do you know what you truly desire? The darkness, the pain that is your true home, no." I managed to scream, the primal urge to fight pushing me back to my feet, renewed fire churning in my chest. "I will not choose despair," but just as the words spilled forth, a trembling emerged from the ground, barely a whisper at first, then escalating to an unforgiving roar. That rift now wider than before was yawning open, a vortex filled with writhing, suffocating darkness. Shapes that were once human spiraled within it, faces merging with the gloom, forever obscured and forgotten. I felt their unending cry resonate within me. They were souls begging for deliverance, a chorus of the lost. As the rift beckoned with a siren's call, my knees threatened to buckle. Yet, I steeled my resolve and gripped my heart with newfound strength. I will not surrender, but the shadows pulsed around me, slavering me in whispers of despair, each vow stronger than the last. You will be one of us, they hissed, dancing closer as the temperature around me plummeted. Tell me how. I shouted, a desperate plea bursting forth, battling against the encroaching madness. How can I save Sarah? The figures paused, momentarily hesitant, caught between power and malice. You must face the truth, they urged, their forms crumbling like ashes in the wind. The promise of release hung thick in the air, enticing me to step closer to the yawning chasm. Face what truth? I questioned, voice shaking as dread laced through my soul. But before their answer could drown in the chaos, the rift erupted with blinding light. A cacophony of screams pierced through the shadows, forcing me back as I became a reluctant observer of the unfolding horror. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, claiming the flickering memories, pulling at their very essence. It was a battle of will, a manifestation of everything I ever feared and desired. And then, in the eye of the storm, Sarah burst forward, her luminous form a beacon of fleeting hope. You must remember. She screamed, frustration and urgency weaving into her voice. But the shadows lunged toward her, merging into a mass that pulsated with hunger, a throbbing entity lusting for release that swelled with each heartbeat, a vortex representing the totality of torment. Sarah! I cried, adrenaline pushing me back toward her, to that light that felt like safety. But the shadows were merciless, tearing at reality itself, the screams of the lost echoing around us in a crescendo. Suddenly, a bright flash erupted from Sarah's hands, illuminating the darkness, splintering the very fabric that had held the shadows together. In that golden surge, the air crackled, a tangible force that quaked through the cavern. And then, everything collapsed into silence as if the world held its breath. Within that stillness, I saw it, the dark figure materialized anew, its eyes glowing with malice, unyielding. You think you can fight this? You've already chosen. A frigid chill crept up my spine as the surge of shadows intensified around me, morphing into a cyclone of despair that threatened to consume both Sarah and me. I braced for impact, heart racing, the shadows whispering secrets of my demise, and just as the darkness surged forth, a chilling realization echoed through me, a splinter of hope emerging unsought, followed by the ghastly embrace of what lay beyond the chiming chorus of broken promises. What if the truth is worse than the horror? The truth loomed before me, clawing at the edges of my sanity with unrelenting hunger. Then, a deafening silence snatched away my thoughts, and a void opened beneath us, ready to swallow everything whole. In that harrowing instant, with terror pooling at the base of my spine and shadows erupting into a tempest, the world dissolved around me, and I felt the excruciating weight of my choice descend upon my soul. The darkness surged higher, and then, just like that, I could see the faces of the tortured souls surrounding us, their eyes locking onto mine. In their gaze lay not only anguish but an invitation, an enticing pull promising what I so desperately sought: acceptance, understanding, and perhaps even solace. Join us, they whispered in unison, their voices melding into the terrifying hush. As the shadows unfurled, ready to consume everything I had ever known, I could only wonder, was surrender my only option? The surrounding darkness beckoned for my final choice, evoking a desperate need for something I had pushed aside too long, and just as I prepared to plunge into oblivion, I felt the grip of Sarah's hand tighten around mine, pulling against the tide of despair. In her eyes, I saw a flickering light of defiance, and with it a question that transcended words. Will you accept the truth? In the split second before the abyss claimed me, an encounter unlike any other swept through my senses, shattering the fragile fabric of reality. And then everything went dark. The silence that followed was unnerving. It enveloped me like a wet shroud, heavy and suffocating. My eyes slowly adjusted to the absence of light, the omnipresent void proving to be a deceptive sanctuary. I felt Sarah at my side, her presence grounding me against the fraying edges of my mind. But then I realized something was amiss. Her grip was not firm, it felt ethereal, as if she was fading, slipping like sand through my fingers. Sarah? I whispered, dread flourishing at the corners of my heart. The weight of the shadows began squeezing me again, a familiar and terrible pressure coaxing my resolve from within. Stay with me. Panic fueled my voice, echoing through the inky blackness, but it felt like shouting into a chasm. There was no response, just the soft rustle as if something unseen shifted around us, the hushed sound of malice threading through the air. That I focused on the last glimmer of her light, desperately pulling on the memory of her luminous gaze that pierced the darkness. It felt like I was grappling with a distant star, one that was slowly burning out. The thought alone sent a jolt of fear through my veins. Please, don't leave me. For a heartbeat, the air crackled. Abruptly, a blinding flash surrounded me, forcing me to shield my eyes. In the mix of black and white, I caught fleeting glimpses of the other lost souls, their hollow expressions contorted with agony and despair. They were prisoners of their choices, snared within this purgatory without escape. Join us, they murmured again, a chorus of empty voices that hovered like a death knell, promising liberation at the cost of losing oneself entirely. The potent weight of their despair clawed at something deep within me. It was a reminder, my darkest truths had shaped me but had also nearly destroyed me. Suddenly, from the depths of this melancholic darkness, a flicker of gold ignited. I remember. I screamed, hurling myself toward the warmth, toward Sarah's fading light. I remember who I was meant to be. With that declaration, the shadows roared, a cacophony of torment intermingling with renewed rage as they surged forth, howling in protest. In response, I cast all my emotions to the fire, regret, fear, and longing, feeding into that memory, that warmth that reminded me of the light we could be together. Awaken. I pleaded into the void, the words echoing with a raw desperation. My heart pulsed with renewed vigor, an unwilling hero battling against an unyielding darkness. But the shadows hissed, as if my newfound strength was only fueling their fury, intensifying their hold on Sarah. Through the chaos, I could hear her voice again, soft yet insistent, reaching out across the layers of despair. You have to find the truth, and it struck me like lightning. What if the truth was not solely my past, but the future that I could choose? A swell of determination coursed through me, igniting deeper shadows at the edge of existence as I realized the horrors surrounding me were not just echoes of my fears but a manifestation of everything I'd ever detached from the love and bonds that had crumbled under the weight of my sorrow. In that realization, the rift opened once more, and the shimmering gold light exploded into the air, coiling around the darkness like a serpent ready to defend its territory. Somewhere, deep in that glow, I could feel Sarah's essence flicker, and I surged toward her, unleashing everything I had held captive, hoping against hope it would heal the fractures between us. Fight. Fight for us. I screamed, my voice mingling with the golden chaos that pulsed through the void. The shadows recoiled, giving way to the warmth, but it was fleeting, fading quickly under the weight of the terrible truth that loomed over us, taunting with requests of acknowledgement. Suddenly, I could feel the darkness morphing, no longer an immovable force but a swirling entity of my making, demanding to be recognized. In that split second, a ghostly silhouette emerged within it, akin to my very own form, but hunched, twisted, and dripping with regret. Accept me, it whispered, a seductive plea that echoed within me. The figure reached out, longing to merge into my being, feeding on my guilt and sorrow, a final embodiment of everything I had tried to escape. The rawness of my scream echoed with all of my essence. I could see the torment in the eyes of the lost souls around us, a tangible reminder of what would happen if I faltered, if I allowed that piece of myself to reign. And as I fought that final battle, the shadows thrashed relentlessly, attempting to engulf my newfound determination. I could feel Sarah's light dimming, flickering against the encroaching tide of despair as the shadows converged around her, whispering promises I dared not listen to. And then it struck, an icy chill at the back of my neck, a whisper curling through the darkness. Will you sacrifice everything for the truth? In that moment, I faced the ominous figure once more, the twisted reflection of my soul, and I understood. I had been searching for absolution, when all I truly needed was acceptance of my pain, my loss, and the haunting echoes of my failures that I had kept at bay for far too long. Sarah, my breath hitched, the truth flashing before me like a veil lifting. But just then, everything shattered as the vortex roared to life. The shadows surged, and a deafening roar filled the void that turned my thoughts into a maelstrom. Join us, they pleaded as one, the cacophony drowning out everything I held dear. In that shattering upheaval, I felt a fierce tug. It could either be the last shriek of despair or the echo of a new beginning, a transformation I had never dared to hope for. And just as darkness threatened to envelop me entirely, a pull yanked me away, a voice, bright among the black, pouring through the veil of horror into the very core of my existence. Remember, I could see Sarah's expression fluttering somewhere beyond the reach of shadows, her eyes vibrant, fighting against the grasping tendrils. But just as I steeled myself against the tide and summoned every ounce of defiance, the abyss cracked with a chilling laughter that echoed in my bones. Your truth will be your undoing, and that was the moment everything vanished. Darkness swallowed sound, light, and hope, plunging me into the abyss of my own making. Then, nothingness gripped my heart, wrapping around me like a serpent as I was consumed by the very specter of my choices. The agony of the darkness was all-consuming, each heartbeat echoing like a death knell in the oppressive silence. Time felt malleable, I had no sense of its passage. My thoughts fluttered like ashes in the wind, scattering into the void as I drifted further into the abyss. And yet, amid that stifling emptiness, something began to coalesce, a burgeoning spark seeking the light. Suddenly, a memory flooded into my consciousness, Sarah's face cradled in the delicate glow of a candle, her laughter mingling with music, a promise of joy that felt like a distant dream. You have to remember, she echoed in the recesses of my mind, her voice an ethereal whisper that fought against the ominous tide of despair. The shadows writhed around me, bastions of the fears I had clung to for too long, clawing at my skin with memories of every fractured friendship and unspoken regret. Yet in that moment of reckoning, I clung to the flickering essence of hope that Sarah represented, feeling its warmth push back against the cold encroachment of darkness. A weight lifted inexplicably, and I began to see, not with physical eyes but the essence of my soul. I found myself standing in a hall of mirrors, reflection after reflection of the countless decisions I had made. Each mirrored surface warped and twisted, echoing the terrors I feared most, the lemurs of loss and abandonment. This isn't just about you. One of the shadows sneered, dragging my focus to a twisted version of myself, eyes hollow, mouth a cruel grin. You've always known it, another mirrored visage said, you can't escape what you are. And as I beheld the parade of broken souls flickering in the fractured glass, I felt something immense stir within me, a connection formed not just between my past and present but with the very torque of humanity. Sarah! I cried out, propelled by the haunting knowledge that she still fought against the darkness, still needed me. Yet reality twisted again, the allure of the abyss glimmering with seductive promises of release. Join us, they beckoned with voices coated in honeyed malice, tendrils of shadow curling around my ankles, seeking to drag me beneath once more. The moment surged a tempest of tumultuous memories, regret flooding over, clawing for my surrender, hopes that hung by a thread pulsated, flickering in the rush of chaos. The portal to the abyss opened wider still, beckoning with the promise of oblivion. Face it. Sarah's voice pierced the veil of despair like a sword through fog. You must confront who you are. I stumbled forward, grasping at that light, that glimmer of her essence calling me back from the brink, and in that vivid instant, I saw its truth thrumming deep within my chest. I will not lose anyone else to my shadows, I swore, the fear igniting into fury. The laughing shadows recoiled, flinching as if struck. I choose to find you. I will not let this end here. And with each word I spoke, the weights of my failures dissolved, exposing the core of hope beneath the possibility of rebirth. The mirrors shattered, a cascade of reflective shards spiraling into the surrounding shadows, the echoes fracturing the grip of those dark tendrils. Each fragment illuminated the cavern, revealing the truth of my memories, a gallery of pain and love, the depths of my regrets clad in color now vibrant and alive. I could see all my friends, hanging on the walls, not as tormented specters but as parts of me that needed acceptance. My past, twisted yet beautiful, a mosaic of loss and triumph, together. I shouted, not knowing where the strength emerged from, but I felt it pulsate, a fierce and unyielding power through my veins. It kindled courage and compassion, pulling me further away from the brink of suffocating darkness. The shadows trembled against my resolve, and just as I felt the first glimmers of panic escalate, I pushed against the tide with every ounce of my being. Beneath the wave of darkness, a form began to materialize. Sarah, seemingly reaching out to me, her voice a calm amidst the storm. "You must let go," she urged, "of what binds you." Shadows flickered, recoiling as I grasped the light, pulling forth all that I had long shunned, me grief, my loss, and the fear that paralyzed me until now. "I see you," I cried out to her, my heart echoing with truth as our gazes locked, and then it happened. The shadows surged toward us, ravenous and vengeful, the walls trembling as if the very foundation was unmooring from reality. As they enveloped me again, I felt Sarah's form slip from my grasp, only to invade my essence, merging into the pulsing light that surged deeper than acknowledgement. "Face it," she implored, and I understood one last truth, that I had become the keeper of shadows, holding on to every fragment of fear, guilt, and betrayal. My heart clenched, the realization inciting a fight as I screamed forward through the chaos. "I'm taking back my soul," I howled into the encroaching darkness. In that moment of clarity, the blinding surge of golden light erupted, cascading over the shadows like a cleansing fire, disrupting their hold, unraveling all that had sought to consume me. The cavern erupted with luminous energy, shadows screaming as they were devoured by the brilliance of acceptance of truth and authenticity, and in that searing light, the shadows twisted and reformed, morphing back into those whom I once loved, anguished yet free, the embodiment of my fears dissolving into the ether as acceptance washed over me. But then, a final shiver coursed through my core, the figure of the twisted reflection appearing once more, its eyes now hollow, the embodiment of my regrets lingering in its gaze. "You've not escaped," it rasped, a whisper clinging to the edges of despair, as a tremor swept through the ground beneath me. "We are not done," it croaked, and in that instant, something shocking took hold, a truth that slapped me with clarity. I had not waged battle against the darkness to claim victory. I had merely ushered in another opportunity, a new beginning that demanded vigilance. The laughter erupted again, echoing through the collapsing shadows, which reached for me one last time. But now, standing firm in the laughter of the encroaching shadows, I realized the harsh truth: me past would never fully leave, it would linger as a haunting reminder of what I had fought to overcome, yet I stood defiantly against it. Mortality, beauty, love, pain, they intertwined, refusing to be simply cast aside. "I am not done," I whispered, clutching the truth that glimmered within. "I choose to be free, not from what has haunted me, but from letting it dictate my every breath." As the cavern folded into itself, shadows shrunk and twisted, the faces of those I had lost echoed forward, twinkling against the gathering light. And as I took a step forward, unyielding against the tendrils of despair, the shadows dissolved, curling around with an eerie familiarity, a part of me that would always remain, forever intertwined. But then, through the swirling light, I felt the disquiet. A shiver trickled down my spine and a whisper danced against my ear. "You think you've won? The darkness will always linger, waiting for your fear to awaken it." Despite the lurking apprehension, I prepared to move forward into the light. A shudder of both terror and understanding wrapped around me as a final silhouette loomed beyond the brilliance, familiar yet twisted, lurking at the edge of my awareness. And as I embraced the light, a memory hissed from the shadows, reverberating through my mind, a chilling reminder: darkness is never far behind, always waiting to claim those who dare to forget. "Remember," it taunted, fading into the echoes of my own making. As the light enveloped me, that last haunting whisper rang out, anchoring itself in my very soul. A chilling reminder echoed endlessly through the void from which I had just emerged. "Remember."